I thought the worst thing they could do was ignore me. But that was before last Christmas, when I discovered the truth they never meant for me to find, and decided to do something no one saw coming. I knew I was the outsider the moment I crossed the threshold of my husband's childhood home. No one had to say it. The silence, the stares, the stiff smiles, they spoke volumes. It was like walking into a room filled with invisible smoke, thick and suffocating. It clung to every dinner conversation, every polite nod, every half-hearted compliment. I breathed it in for 6 long years. My name is Lena. I'm 35, and I live just outside of Boston. I work as an accountant for a mid-sized tech company. Not exactly a flashy life, but a stable one. I met Nathan in grad school in Massachusetts. We fell fast. Within 2 years, we were married. Back then, I thought I'd found my forever, a man who promised to shield me from life's storms. What I didn't realize was the storm would be coming from inside the house. Nathan's family was what they proudly called traditional, obsessed with appearances and what they described as true American values. His mother, Gloria, a perfectly coiffed woman in her 60s with steel blue eyes and a jaw that never unclenched, didn't like me. I knew it the first time we met, when her handshake nearly cracked my fingers and her smile looked like she'd just bitten into something sour. Her daughters, Carla and Jenna, were no warmer. Together, they formed an icy wall, unbreakable, united, and determined to keep me out. At first, I thought they'd come around. I really believed that. I showed up with expensive wine, complimented their table settings, even learned Gloria's prized pumpkin pie recipe, hoping it would earn me a place at the table. Emotionally, not just physically. But nothing worked. My efforts dropped into a bottomless void. Their rejection wasn't loud. It was quieter and more brutal for it. The kind of rejection that lives in the little things. A missing invitation, a fake smile, a laugh you weren't included in. Every year, I held on to hope that they'd finally see me. And every year, I felt myself shrinking a little more. Alone in a room full of family, Gloria had a talent. The kind that didn't require yelling or slamming doors. She knew how to make you feel like a stranger in your own home with a single look. She played the perfect host when others were around, smiling sweetly and asking if I wanted more potatoes. But behind closed doors, I was nothing more than the help. While she and her daughters sipped Pinot Grigio and reminisced about their summers in Tuscany or ski trips in Aspen, I was in the kitchen scraping gravy off china. Not once did they invite me into their laughter. They'd burst into inside jokes I didn't understand and never explained. I'd sit at the end of the long dining table, smiling like I wasn't breaking inside, holding my wine glass like a lifeline. I tried telling Nathan, more than once. They just need more time, he'd say with a shrug. You're imagining things, Lena. My mom's just a little particular. No, not done. Your mom was cruel. For the first 3 years, I kept bringing it up. I begged him to see it, to stand up for me. By year 4, I stopped asking. I stopped expecting. They never added me to the family group chat. I only found out about ski trips, brunches, even birthdays through Facebook posts. Photos of them all smiling. The caption always some version of family is everything. I wasn't even in the picture, literally or metaphorically. Then came last Christmas. The warning sign I didn't pay enough attention to. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon. I had gotten off work early and was driving home when I noticed Carla's and Jenna's cars parked outside Gloria's. Well, Nathan hadn't mentioned anything. I thought maybe I'd missed something. So I parked, walked in. They were gathered around the Christmas tree, unwrapping gifts in the soft glow of fairy lights. Cashmere scarves, Sephora bags, imported wine. When they saw me, the room froze for a heartbeat. Carla offered a half-hearted smile. Oh, you're home early. We were going to call you. Gloria didn't even look at me. Just a few small gifts. Nothing big, she said, eyes on the TV. And there I was, standing there in my work clothes, surrounded by twinkling lights, laughter that wasn't mine, and gifts I'd never receive. Nathan was on the couch, glued to his phone, completely detached from my humiliation. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst came a year later. The gift that broke everything this past Christmas. I walked into Gloria's house expecting nothing, but somehow I was still unprepared for what waited. The house looked like a magazine spread. Cinnamon and baked butter hung in the air. The living room glittered under fairy lights, and the Christmas tree stretched to the ceiling, draped in silver, gold, and memories I was never part of. Carla was laughing at one of Jenna's jokes. Gloria, in her designer apron and wine-stained lipstick, was already pouring herself a second glass. And Nathan? He was casually chatting with his mother by the bar, his back to me, completely unaware that I'd been standing behind him for nearly a minute. He didn't turn around. No smile. No hello. It was like I didn't exist. Dinner was served on a table that looked like a royal banquet. White lace cloth, gleaming glassware, flickering candles, and a turkey that Gloria placed in the center like it was sacred. She sat at the head, of course. Carla and Jenna sat to her left and right, like loyal ladies in waiting. I was seated at the far end. As always, they talked and talked. Carla went on about her trip to Napa Valley with her new boyfriend. Jenna bragged about some art exhibit she got invited to, though I knew she was just tagging along. Gloria kept praising them both, tossing in casual jabs between sips of wine. Some women just never learn to make a proper pumpkin pie, she said, eyes locked on mine with a smirk. I didn't flinch. I smiled, took a small sip of wine, swallowed the burn. I told myself maybe, just maybe if I stayed quiet this time, they'd ease off. That if I didn't show weakness, they wouldn't bother attacking. But I was wrong. Dessert came, and with it the final blow. Gloria clapped her hands 3 times, like some grand matriarch making a royal announcement. Before we cut the pie, she said brightly, I have a little surprise. She reached beneath her chair and pulled out large, deep red gift bags, each one with a custom label and a shiny bow. She passed them out, one by one, smiling with theatrical delight. Carla opened hers, a leather designer handbag that I knew cost at least $500. Jenna's, an all-inclusive spa weekend at a luxury resort. Nathan got a rare bottle of whiskey, one he had casually mentioned months ago. And me? There was no bag left. Gloria looked around, then let out a fake gasp. Oh dear, Lena, it looks like I forgot about you. She laughed. Carla laughed. Jenna giggled. Nathan, my husband, laughed too. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break. It didn't snap. It sharpened. I gently placed my wine glass down, looked directly at Gloria, and said in a calm, even voice, Good thing I didn't forget about you. The room went still, like someone had hit pause on a movie mid-scene. Gloria blinked. Excuse me. I smiled. You'll see. The truth wrapped in silver. The silence around the table was thick enough to drown in. Carla's brow furrowed. Jenna shifted in her seat. Nathan finally looked up from his plate, eyes darting toward me like I had just spoken in a language he didn't understand. I didn't say another word. Instead, I reached into my handbag and pulled out a small silver-wrapped box, tied with a red satin ribbon. The kind of gift that looked expensive, intentional. I stood up slowly and walked over to Gloria, placing it in front of her with both hands. For you, I said, never taking my eyes off her face. Her lips twisted into something halfway between suspicion and insult. You didn't have to, she said with a forced chuckle. I never expect anything from you. I know, I answered quietly. But this one's different. This one is special. Everyone watched her. Carla leaned forward. Jenna sat up straighter. Nathan turned fully toward me now, no longer smiling. Gloria hesitated, then pulled the ribbon loose and unfolded the paper, her hands moving slower than usual, like she was sensing danger. Inside the box was a thick stack of papers, neat, official-looking. The second she pulled them out, her face changed. Her hands trembled. What is this?" she asked, voice suddenly hoarse. I walked back to my seat and poured myself another glass of wine, unbothered. Calm, almost serene. "Financial reports," I said, "from your event planning business, along with 7 years' worth of amended tax returns." Gloria's eyes flew across the top page, then the next, her lips pressing tighter with each passing second. I reviewed everything. Turns out, you underreported over $240,000 in income, not including the personal expenses you charged to the company account. The air shifted. No one spoke. No one even breathed. The only sound in the room was the quiet, frantic flipping of paper, and Gloria's quickening breath. Her face had gone pale, not the subtle kind, but the kind that creeps in when someone realizes their entire world is about to collapse. Jenna finally whispered, "Mom, is this real?" Carla snatched the stack and started skimming, her expression darkening. "You hid this from us." Gloria didn't respond. Her jaw clenched. Her hands white-knuckled the arms of her chair like she could hold herself steady through willpower alone. I sipped my wine and spoke evenly. "I just didn't want you to forget to report to the IRS this year. Like you forgot to buy me a gift." Nathan's face was frozen, not in confusion, but in shock. He looked between his mother and me, unsure which world he was standing in. He finally spoke. "Lena, what the hell? You've been spying on my mother." "No," I said sharply. "I've been investigating. There's a difference." Gloria slammed her palm on the table and stood, eyes burning. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Oh, but I do," I replied. "And we both know this goes far deeper than tax evasion." Carla's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What else did she do?" I looked her straight in the eye. "She lied to you. To both of you. She had money, plenty of it, and pretended she didn't. Told you she couldn't help you fix your house, Carla. Turned her back on you, Jenna, when you were jobless and desperate." Jenna's eyes filled with tears instantly. "You told me you were broke. You said you were saving for retirement." Carla's face twisted in disbelief. "You said you couldn't even co-sign for the kids' condo. And all this time, you were hoarding money and booking first-class flights." Gloria looked at me like she wanted to strangle me. But beneath the rage, I saw something new. Fear. Real fear. Nathan turned to her, voice trembling. "Mom, is this true?" Gloria snapped. "Don't listen to her. She's twisting everything." My voice cut in like ice. "The USB on the table has all the evidence. Bank receipts, email threads, tax documents, even her accountant's notes. It's all there." Gloria lunged forward to grab it, but Jenna blocked her. "No," she said, voice steel. "I want to see it." I sat back, calm, quiet, a mirror reflecting everything they didn't want to see, because the truth had finally come to dinner. The collapse of a queen, the dining room that once sparkled with curated perfection, now buzzed with confusion and betrayal. The Christmas lights still blinked, soft and rhythmic, but everything else had come undone. Carla's voice trembled with disbelief as she flipped through another page of the financial documents. "Wait, what is this?" "A transaction from Dad's account." I looked up, sipping my wine slowly. "Your mother didn't just lie to the IRS. She pulled money from your father's 401k, retirement funds he spent a lifetime building." Jenna snatched the paper from Carla, her fingers trembling. "This is real. This transaction is in his name, but he's never mentioned any of this." Carla turned to Gloria, her voice suddenly cold and stripped of all the years of loyalty. "You said you never touched a cent of Dad's account, that there was nothing left when I needed help for the condo." Gloria stood frozen, gripping the back of her chair like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Her face had gone slack, her lips trembling, no longer with performance, but with the terror of exposure. "I just borrowed it," she whispered. "I was going to put it back. It wasn't supposed to." "How?" I asked, my voice like a knife. "By cooking the books? You've been embezzling for years, Gloria. There was no plan to repay anything. Just lies, one on top of another." Carla slammed the papers down, her voice raw. "You watched me nearly lose my house. I begged you for help, and you said no. You said you didn't have anything." Jenna stepped forward, her voice breaking. "My baby was in the hospital. I borrowed money from my ex because you told me your hands were tied. And now I find out you were funneling money into private accounts." Gloria couldn't even look at them. Her shoulders rose and fell with shallow breaths. But her silence, the absence of denial, said everything. I leaned back slightly, watching her unravel. "You didn't just lie to the government. You lied to your own children. You stole from your husband. You abandoned your family, not with distance, but with deception." That's when the door opened. A gust of cold air swept through the room as Richard, Gloria's husband, stepped inside, wearing a simple gray sweater, still holding a cup of tea. He stopped in the doorway, eyes scanning the tense, broken scene. What's going on? Carla turned quickly, grabbing the stack of documents with shaking hands. Dad, you need to see this. She handed the papers to him, page after page filled with cold, irrefutable facts. Richard's brow furrowed, his fingers flipping through each line like he was trying to read a language he never thought he'd need to know. With every number, his face turned more pale, more hollow. He looked up at Gloria, eyes bloodshot. Is this true? Gloria stepped forward, hands out as if she could still reach him, still manipulate him with a trembling whisper. I did it for us, for the family. I had to keep the company afloat. I was going to tell you. Richard stepped back like she'd slapped him. You took money from my retirement account without a single word. His voice wasn't loud, but it vibrated with betrayal so deep it didn't need to be. I worked my whole life for that money. I trusted you, and you didn't even ask. Carla turned to her mother, her voice sharp. It wasn't about the company, Mom. You used that money for luxury vacations, designer clothes, private accounts. You didn't save the business. You funded your ego. Richard's hands were trembling now. He dropped the papers onto the floor as if they burned. I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. Jenna's voice cracked again. Mom, how could you? Gloria's face collapsed into panic. Her eyes flew to me, and that's when her rage broke free. You, she hissed. You set me up. You did this. You poisoned them against me. I didn't move, didn't flinch, just stared at her like a mirror. Cold, honest. No, Gloria. You set yourself up. I just turned on the light. She lunged forward, but Richard raised his arm to block her path. Enough, he said. His voice didn't rise, but it had the weight of 1,000 storms. If what I just read is even half true, I'm calling a lawyer. I can't live with someone who would betray me like this. Gloria went still. Her shoulders slumped, and in the glow of Christmas lights, the matriarch of the family, the queen of her perfect world, finally shattered. But it wasn't over. Not yet. When silence breaks the body, the room was silent, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that comes right before something breaks. And then something did. Richard staggered. Just a step at first, then another. He reached out blindly, trying to grip the edge of the table. I can't breathe, he mumbled, his voice cracking in a way I'd never heard. Jenna leapt from her chair. Dad! I was already moving. So was Carla. Richard, sit down, but he didn't. His knees buckled, his body folding like a tree cut from the base. His cup of tea shattered on the floor. We caught him, barely, but his body was heavy, limp, like the strength had drained out all at once. Nathan stood frozen. His wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor, but he didn't even blink. Call an ambulance. I yelled, my voice finally breaking through the fog. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling. He's having a heart attack. Jenna was already dialing. 911, yes, please. We need an ambulance now. My father. He's not responding. Gloria collapsed to her knees, gripping her head in her hands. Oh God, Richard. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me. But no one reached for her. No one held her hand. No one believed her. I looked at her, and something in me, something that had ached for years, went ice cold. Her sobs were loud. Too loud. Her hands trembled like she was acting on a stage. There were no tears. Don't touch him, I said, my voice low but sharp enough to cut. She started to crawl toward Richard, but Carla blocked her path. Stay back, Mom, she said. Her voice was steel now. You've done enough. Gloria's face twisted in shock, like she couldn't believe her daughters were no longer on her side. But the truth had finally burned through every lie. The ticking of the dining room clock was the only sound for what felt like forever. The smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey still lingered in the air, but it was no longer warm. It was haunting. 10 minutes later, the ambulance pulled into the driveway. The EMTs burst through the door like a gust of wind, urgency in every movement. Gloria tried to guide them, tried to lead them to Richard like she was still the hostess in charge. But one of them brushed past her with a single, firm word, space. I stepped back, pulling Carla with me. Jenna clung to the wall, shaking. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, still as stone, eyes blank, like his mind had shut down. Gloria dropped to the floor again, this time sobbing louder than before. Please save him. He's my husband. Please. But the EMTs didn't respond. They worked fast, checking Richard's vitals, hooking up wires, placing a mask over his face. One of them called out, "He still has a pulse. We're taking him in." "Whose family?" "I'm his daughter," Carla said, stepping forward. "I'll ride with him." I placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking gently. "I'll drive you and Jenna. You're not going through this alone." Gloria stumbled to her feet, disoriented. "I'll come too." Jenna turned to her, eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. "No one's stopping you. But don't pretend. We've seen everything now." Gloria said nothing. No more sobbing. No more shouting. She simply followed the stretcher, a ghost trailing a body she'd nearly destroyed. Nathan walked behind us, but I didn't turn back to look at him. I couldn't. Not after what I'd seen in that room. Not after the silence he offered me for 6 years, and the silence he gave his father when it mattered most. As the ambulance pulled away into the night, sirens howling through the cold December air, I glanced up at the sky. No stars, just swirling black clouds. That Christmas didn't smell like cinnamon anymore. It didn't hold the warmth of laughter or the hope of gifts. It was the Christmas of truth, of collapse, of consequences. And Richard's fall? That was just the beginning. Waiting rooms and final choices. The hospital waiting room was colder than I expected. Not the kind of cold you feel in your bones, but the kind that seeps under your skin. A silence so thick it wraps around your thoughts and doesn't let go. Carla and Jenna sat side by side, both staring into nothing. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The air between them said everything. I stood near the reception desk, holding my phone like a lifeline, even though the screen had long since gone dark. The only sound in the room was the occasional squeak of a nurse's shoes on polished floors and the low hum of fluorescent lights. Nathan sat across from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, watching me, saying nothing. And then he stood, walked over. His voice was low, not gentle, not warm, just stunned. "Are you satisfied now?" At first, I thought I misheard him. But no, he meant it. That wasn't shock over his father's collapse. It was blame. Aimed straight at me. "This is what you wanted, right?" he said. "To expose her? To humiliate my whole family? To send my father to the ER on Christmas?" I stared at him, stunned. "You think this is what I wanted? You planned this," he continued. "You waited, held on to everything, and you picked Christmas dinner to blow it all up. You knew Dad had a heart condition. You think I didn't notice?" Each word landed like a punch. Not because it hurt, but because it revealed how little he had understood me. 6 years together, and this is what he believed. "So, you're not angry that your mother lied, embezzled, betrayed your father. You're angry at me for not sitting there and smiling through it." He didn't answer. "You're mad I didn't stay silent, that I didn't swallow one more humiliation." Nathan's fists clenched at his sides. "You could have handled it differently. You could have pulled her aside, talked to her privately. You didn't have to." I laughed, short, cold, and empty. "A better time? What do you think I've been doing for the past 6 years? I tried. Again and again. I asked you to speak to her, to see me. And every single time, you told me I was imagining it." He looked away, but I wasn't done. "I used to think you were stuck in the middle, that maybe it was hard for you, caught between your mother and your wife. But now I see the truth." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You weren't stuck. You chose. You chose her. Over and over again. And tonight, you chose silence." Carla stood suddenly, her voice firm. "Don't blame her, Nathan. Don't you dare. We saw everything." Jenna nodded, eyes red but unwavering. "She didn't break anything. She just showed us what was already broken." Nathan looked at both of them, but he had no words. He turned back to me, eyes dark and full of something I couldn't name. I looked at him, no longer angry, just empty. "I don't need you to protect me, Nathan. I never did. I just needed you to see me." I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my wedding ring, and placed it in his hand. "This is the last time I wait for you to choose me." His hand trembled around the ring. He didn't say a word, and I didn't wait for one. I turned and walked back to my seat. Calm. Finished. Because sometimes a marriage doesn't end with shouting or infidelity. Sometimes it ends with silence, when the person you love looks right through you and says nothing. The quiet goodbye. I didn't wait for Nathan to say anything, because I already knew. If he had understood, he would have spoken long ago. After the doctor finally emerged and told us that Richard was out of critical condition but would need careful monitoring due to severe heart damage, Carla and Jenna stayed behind to be with him. Gloria had disappeared. A nurse told us she'd been asked not to interrupt the treatment. I imagined her wandering the hospital halls, makeup smeared, trying to figure out how to perform sympathy without an audience. Nathan stayed in the waiting room, slouched in the same chair, staring at the floor like something inside him had been scraped out. I walked past him and didn't look back. I didn't need to. When I stepped out into the cold night, the wind cut across my face, sharp and bitter, but I didn't feel it. I felt weightless. The wedding ring sat in my coat pocket now, a small piece of metal that no longer held any meaning. A relic from a life I had already stepped away from in my mind. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just stood in the living room, surrounded by the fragments of a life I had once believed in. Wedding photos on the wall, honeymoon souvenirs from Oregon, the worn leather chair where Nathan used to sit every evening, reading football scores on his phone. Everything looked familiar and completely foreign. I pulled out the ring, placed it in the jewelry box, and opened the closet. My suitcase was already there, half-packed since the week I started digging into Gloria's business records. I didn't need much. Just clothes, my laptop, my passport, wallet. Freedom doesn't take up much space. Before I fell asleep that night, I drafted a short email. Subject line, begin divorce proceedings. The next morning, I sent it to the attorney I had contacted weeks earlier. I made myself a coffee, opened the window, let the sunlight hit my face, and I waited for the hollow feeling to come. But it didn't. That afternoon, I got the first message from Nathan since the hospital. Lena, please. We need to talk. I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, Gloria was officially summoned for questioning by federal authorities. My lawyer had submitted everything. The falsified returns, the bank transfers, the emails between her and her accountant. The documents were airtight. Not just tax evasion. Fraud. Fake employee names to extract COVID-era small business relief funds. Federal charges. I didn't feel triumphant. Just justified. The local news ran the story. Gloria exiting the courthouse in a gray suit. No makeup. Her once perfect hair pulled into a limp bun. She didn't look powerful anymore. Just empty. Richard filed for divorce the same day he left the hospital. He'd gone straight from the ICU to a lawyer's office. Carla sent me a text. He didn't even pack a bag. Just walked out. Jenna cut off contact with Gloria completely. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a letter. And Nathan? He flooded my inbox with every kind of message. Angry, pleading, confused. One email read, "You planned this from the beginning, didn't you?" I stared at the screen for a while before closing my laptop. I didn't reply, because if he still thought I was the villain, there was nothing left to explain. The door that closed softly one afternoon, near the end of January, Nathan showed up outside my new apartment. He didn't knock at first, just stood there, looking through the glass of the security door like someone trying to remember how to ask for forgiveness. "Lena," he called softly. "Please, just 5 minutes." His voice was tired, his face drawn and older somehow, like the months had aged him more than the years ever did. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Nathan?" "I've been thinking," he said, "and I was wrong. I should have stood by you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, unmoved. "You weren't just wrong," I said quietly. "You watched me be humiliated. Over and over. You saw it, the exclusion, the cruelty, the jokes made at my expense. And you did nothing. And when I finally stood up, you told me I was destroying your family." He didn't deny it. He just looked at me, eyes rimmed with guilt, voice barely a whisper. "I know you don't trust me anymore, but I want to fix it. All of it. Not to win you back, just to be someone who can live with himself again." I shook my head gently. "You don't need to fix anything for me. I'm not waiting anymore. I already chose myself, and I don't regret it." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I was already done. I closed the door. Not in anger. Not with drama. Just firmly. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Sunlight spilled through the curtains in long golden ribbons across the wooden floor. I stood still, breathing it in. For the first time in 6 years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to love me the right way. I had loved myself enough to leave. After that, I didn't hear from Nathan for a while. Weeks passed, maybe even months. I didn't count, because my life had finally become mine again. A few stray calls came in from unfamiliar numbers. I blocked them. One email stood out. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." I read it in a cafe, just a few blocks from my new place. "I've started therapy," it said. "Not to get you back, just so I can finally look in the mirror and not feel ashamed." I read it once, then hit archive. No reply, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need his apology anymore. I had something better. I had peace. The life I chose these days, I wake up at 6 a.m. like clockwork. I made my coffee, open a window, let the early light stretch across the clean white walls of my small North End studio, a quiet corner of Boston that's somehow always peaceful, even when the city hums outside. I don't hear yelling anymore. No forced small talk. No awkward dinners where I shrink myself smaller just to keep the peace. It's just me now, and for the first time in a long time, that's enough. I grocery shop alone, and it doesn't feel lonely. I eat dinner in silence, and it feels full. I buy fresh flowers every Friday and read on Sundays. I revise my budget at the start of each month, not because I have to, but because I finally get to build my life on purpose. I don't talk to Nathan. I don't check his social media. I don't respond to the occasional email or call from his mother. Though lately, they've stopped altogether. When Gloria was formally charged with tax fraud and financial crimes, I didn't celebrate. I didn't even read the full article. I folded the newspaper, dropped it into the recycling bin, and poured myself another cup of coffee. Because I finally understood something, real victory doesn't come when someone else falls. It comes when they no longer have power over you. Carla and Jenna still send the occasional text, mostly short thank you notes that I know I don't need, but appreciate anyway. One day, Jenna sent a message that read, "If you hadn't spoken up, we'd still be living in denial. I'm sorry we let you suffer alone." I didn't reply, but I smiled. That was enough. A few weeks later, after Gloria's story hit the bigger papers, Nathan tried one last time. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew. I didn't even let it ring 3 times. Decline. 3 days after that, I got an email. "I have no excuses left. I'm in therapy now. I want to fix everything. Not to win you back, but so I can face myself in the mirror." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I no longer needed anything from him. That's the thing about healing. It doesn't come all at once. It creeps in slowly, quietly, in small habits and ordinary moments. Like the warmth of a bookstore on a rainy Saturday. The way a stranger smiles at you over a cup of coffee. The soft rustle of pages when no one else is talking. That afternoon, I sat in a corner bookstore on Hanover Street, flipping through a novel I never had time to read when I was someone's wife. A middle-aged woman beside me leaned over and said with a smile, "That's a good one. You like the ending?" I smiled back. I just had an ending of my own. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't have to. When I stepped out into the light drizzle, the streets were wet and the air was cold. But I didn't feel cold. I felt warm. I felt strong. Because freedom, I realized, doesn't always come in loud declarations or dramatic exits. Sometimes it looks like a quiet apartment, a peaceful morning, a hot drink with no one to serve but yourself. I used to think happiness was being chosen. Now I know. Happiness is choosing yourself. I don't know what's ahead. Life's uncertain that way. But I know what I'll never go back to. I'll never again be the woman who sat in silence, begging to be seen. I've already made my choice. I choose me. The strength to walk away. Lena's story isn't just about betrayal. It's not just about in-laws who never accepted her, or a husband who refused to stand up. It's about what happens when a woman stops asking for a seat at the table and decides to build her own. She didn't seek revenge through chaos. She didn't fight fire with fire. She chose truth. She chose dignity. She chose herself. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can do. Because walking away doesn't mean you're weak. It means you finally realized you deserve peace more than proximity, respect more than tradition, and love, real love, over loyalty to people who never truly saw you. So if you're listening to this story, and something inside you feels familiar, maybe this is your sign to speak up, to choose yourself, to walk away from what breaks you and walk toward what heals you. Because at the end of the day, you don't need anyone to choose you. You just need to know you're worth choosing by you. And when you do, that's when the story really begins. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.